long-suffering person who's Hi everybody, welcome to It's All Right with Suzette, a half-hour show on the craft of writing. And my name is Suzette Martinez Standring. And it's the month of May, and I don't know about you, but the month of May has a very maternal aspect to me. It is about renewal and love and all things motherhood. And so we have a wonderful guest today, Bette J. Freedson. She is a clinical social worker and certified group psychotherapist, and she lives in South Berwick, Maine. Berwick, Maine. Right. And she is the author of Soul Mother's Wisdom, 7 Insights for the Single Mother. It is a fantastic book. It's got a lot of practical help. It's inspirational. It has a very spiritual and holistic feel to it. And I found it to be an extremely encouraging book. And so she's here with us today, Bette, to talk about this wonderful book. Thank you. Can you give us a description and what the reader can expect from reading Soul Mother's Wisdom, 7 Insights for the Single Mother?
Thank you. I hope that the reader will derive comfort, inspiration, and practical ideas and strategies for how to succeed at being a single parent, or being a parent, period, or being a person who can develop the internal sense of wisdom and soul that can help in the personal journey of life.
You know, you talked about some studies, there were some studies about how children will do better based on the behavior and reaction of their own parents, especially the mother. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your book helps with that?
Thank you. I would like to do that. You know, there are people who have done studies to prove one thing or another, and various ways that people have tried to say that children from single-parent families don't do very well. You can find statistics to back up just about anything you want. What I have found in my practice and in my life is that what's important for the children is how well the parents are doing, whether they're together, whether they're separated, or whether it's just a single parent household without another partner. The children thrive when the parents thrive. And so my intention is to offer the parent, and it's geared to single mothers, but of course it could be for any parent really, is to give them the substance spiritually, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and practically, very practically, they need to do this job for the sake of themselves and for the sake of the children.
You know, when I read your book, I do feel that being a single mother is one of the greatest challenges. And there is a lot of negativity associated with being a single mother. People use words like broken homes and things like that. And as I read it, you gave practical insights into changing one's perspective, viewpoint, how you can change your mindset from negative to something very positive. So can you talk a little bit about, say, the typical mindset of a single mother in a negative way, and how your book can transform that kind of thinking?
Well, I can talk about the mindset I had,
Okay,
which
that's
might
great.
have been somewhat typical, because it is really hard to be a single parent. So the mindset can take us into places where I feel like, why me? Why am I in this terribly difficult position? Why am I having so many problems? And it can lead to feeling victimized and feeling as if the world is against me. That's one aspect. It can also lead to depression, anxiety, to think so negatively. So what I offer the reader is a way to transform that thinking, a way to think about oneself as a courageous, strong, mature, resilient woman. And in the book, I do that through stories of other single mothers to show their resilience, and also my own story to show the reader that, you know, far from being a saint or Pollyanna of, oh, everything's perfect and wonderful, I had lots of opportunity to think negatively, but to show the reader how others have transformed the thinking and how they can transform their thinking. Because one of the things that we know in the holistic perspective, Suzette, is that the mind and the body, the spirit, are connected. And when we're thinking more clearly and more healthily, our bodies are more healthy and we have more energy for ourselves and our children. And I do come back to the children because it is about us and it is about our children.
And that spiritual, holistic aspect to approaching getting stronger in your mind and behavior in a positive way is beautifully addressed in your book. I found it to be full of stories. And you know, they're not just feel-good stories. They are individual stories that when you're reading them, you actually say, my gosh, this sounds so hard, almost impossible to overcome. And then you address the perception shift about how often single mothers don't give thought to all that they have already accomplished. The endurance factor, the perseverance factor that goes on daily. They're just thinking about what they can't do or what's too hard to tackle. Now, in your book, there are a lot of acronyms. Great practical advice. You know, one of them was let me see, SOLVE, S-O-L-V. Can you talk about that?
I love that one because
I did too.
It has a lot. It was lifted from a lot of other places because a lot of people have spoken about how to solve problems. But I put it into a 5-step process, and each letter is one step in the process. So the S is to begin with stilling the mind and to allow the relaxation to come in so the mind can then open to ideas and information, and that has to do with the soul wisdom, the guidance from inside. And then the L is about letting go of negativity. You know, they all go together, and even though it's linear, it's not always linear.
Right, exactly.
You know, you still the mind and let go. And then to verify, meaning for me, I had to look for a V. So I came up with verify. Maybe I'll come up with another V someday, but to really use the practical mind with the intuitive mind, use them together. And then the E is to evaluate. So we live out the wisdom, we live out what we've decided to do about a problem, and then we evaluate. We take some action or inaction, which could be action, and then evaluate, how did this work? If it worked well, we've got a hit. If not, we go back to the process again. So that it gives a real practical direction for coming up with solutions. One of the things that I find as a therapist is people don't call up and say, hi, I want to tell you how good life is. People come in with the problems. They also come in with the resources inside for the solutions. And so this helps to draw that forth for the person.
You know, your book, it may seem, you know, average size, but it is jam-packed with a lot of insights and practical help, a lot of spiritual and emotional encouragement. It's targeted for the single mother, but what I found after reading it is that parenting, motherhood, it's a pretty lonely journey in a lot of ways, whether you're married or not. And many women out there, oftentimes if their partners are working and their jobs take them away and they pretty much have the sole responsibility, they are put in that position of single motherhood. You know, and there's a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of negativity surrounding the have to raise children alone. And it made me also think of gay parents, how they have to also, they also feel in some ways isolated and alone in their struggle to raise healthy children because of the perceptions.
Yes, that are so many points there to address. One of the things that I've talked about in the book and talked about with other people as during the writing and since the publication is the fact that the stigma has somewhat lifted around being a single parent. However, the difficulties and the sense of being alone is still there.
Yes.
And we need supports, and we need other people, and we need helpful guidance, which is one of the purposes in the book. I know we're going to talk more about the writing, but I want to say, connecting the writing at this moment, as I was writing Soul Mother's Wisdom, it was occurring to me that what I was saying many times was for all single parents. And I wanted to direct it particularly to single mothers because I was one, and I wrote the book I wanted. But all parents have the need for support and comfort. It's an incredible job. It's 24/7, except
24/7.
for, you know, the hour that you might be lucky enough to get a babysitter or a grandparent. But it's intense.
You know, we have a couple of minutes before the break,
Okay.
and one of the things I'd love for you to briefly explain is the lemon solution.
Oh, I love the lemon solution. After I had written the book, a dear friend who's also an author said, you could call it lemon aid, A-I-D. And I thought A-I-D-E or however. But the lemon solution, and viewers can try it, is to imagine that you're sucking on a lemon. And when you imagine that, most likely you can feel that little salivary effect. And so that's the proof that to me, a little simple way of proving that what we think affects how we feel, affects us physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so if you can affect the lemon solution, you can affect it in larger ways in your life.
That's so interesting. It's true, because when I imagine sucking on a lemon, right away, this part starts
Right
to go
here.
dry.
Yeah.
And it's very true. What we imagine, what we think has a bodily effect, a physical effect on us, and it affects everyone around us if you think about it in other ways. Well, that's fantastic. And in a little bit, we're going to come back to Bette Freedson, and she's going to talk about the process of writing Soul Mother's Wisdom. And I want to thank you for being with us for this first part of the segment, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, and we're here with Bette Freedson, the author of Soul Mother's Wisdom, and now we're going to talk to her about the process of writing this terrific book. So, I think that every author has a moment of creation, and earlier you had talked about it being cataclysmic when you started writing your first notes, you know, starting off on the journey of writing this book. Can you tell us about that? Can you share it?
I would love to, because this was such an important moment. And I'm going to say it to you, Suzette, because I know you write, and you'll probably get this as a writer and an author. but I want to say it to people out in the audience who are writing, that the book I wrote lived inside of me for a very long time, and I didn't know exactly, I didn't even know during the writing, which we can talk about more, how it would eventually emerge. In 2000, my husband Ray and I went to a big conference and heard Harriet Lerner, the author of The Dance of Anger and Dance of Intimacy, as the keynote. And in this huge arena, I felt she was speaking directly to me, and she said, and I say to the viewers, for those of you out there writing, do not give up. She told us it took 5 years to get The Dance of Anger published, which is now an iconic book. It's a really famous book. And I felt that that was really sort of it was a key, it turned a key for me. And we walked out of the arena and I jotted my first notes for Soul Mother's Wisdom on the program for the conference. And the writing has morphed and changed a lot because it was a lot of years from those notes to the publication.
How long was the process of creating this book from the time you started your notes to publication?
15 years.
15 years.
Now, for the first 5 or so, I did not write much. And my writing was not very good. Of course, as a former English teacher, I'm being extremely critical. But my writing has changed a lot. And I learned how to make things tighter and more concise. But in those first years, I wrote maybe a total of a month or 2 out of the whole year in spurts. And then I've had a lot of help along the way, wonderful people who have assisted me and coached me so that my writing improved, and I learned how to write with my voice instead of just with my head. I learned how to hear the writing, and everyone has their own process, and I'd love to hear yours because it's fascinating.
Well, I think that what resonates with me is how you start off and you might have an idea of what you think it's going to look like, and as you go along in the journey of writing, it takes a completely different form. In your book, there are lots of stories, relatable stories, where you can learn as if you're having a conversation with someone, sharing very intimately their challenges, their mindset. And then you have a lot of practical advice that I'm sure that you've drawn from your long career as a group psychotherapist. And your own story.
Absolutely.
Your own story. Now, I guess my big question is, when you're bringing that wealth of information and experiences into writing a book like this, how did you come to organize the format of it? Because that's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information, and a lot of information never made it in.
Wow.
I have a very, very long proposal that has other pieces that may be in subsequent books. But some of the decision about how to organize came from the help I had from a woman in New Jersey who became my editor, coach, friend, muse, and hatchet woman. And she would say, you know, too much here, too much here. And then I learned to do that myself. And I could begin to feel where a word should go or a phrase should go. And I think each writer has to learn that for himself or herself. And so it came together when I got the idea for Soul Mother's Wisdom, 7 Insights.
Yes.
There were other titles.
Yes.
That gave me the basic structure. And then I chose the sections that I thought would be the most important, like the parenting and my own psychic development, which led to the access to my own inner wisdom. It was chapter 5, which is one of my favorite parts of my life story, is that development.
When writing a book, especially when you're putting yourself in there, I think one of the greatest challenges is being vulnerable and real. And some of your own personal stories are heartbreaking. I mean, they're very immediate. What advice do you have for for aspiring writers who want to write their story but still want to write from a distance? They're not quite ready to share their pain, What was that like for
That's
you?
a fantastic question. One of the reasons it took me so long is because I did not want to write about the pain until I had dealt with the forgiveness. And I did not want it to be a story about my feeling like a victim or accusing other people or look what you did to me. I wanted to be about the healing and the recovery from the pain. And while I was writing, I was working on that. I was also writing from the perspective of how would other people read this, the people that I love and care about. It felt very important to me to tell my story in an authentic way and not in a, I'm going to stick it to somebody else kind of way. And so that's part of what took time. And each one has to decide that, each author for herself or himself, of how you hope to come across. There is no guarantee about how other people will receive it.
Right.
And so that's part of what I tried to do, is heal myself during the process so that what came across was the wisdom and not bitterness.
Another aspect of your book that I thought was very powerful was the telling of other people's stories. Now, you don't use their real names.
No.
However, again, those stories are very moving, very vulnerable. Did you run into any problems getting people to allow you to include their stories? Because even with the anonymity, there's always the fear someone's going to recognize me, they're going to know it's me. So do you have any advice for people when you are saying, when you want to include something that raw and scary to a lot of people who are not used to being publicly revealed, as it were?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I would say make sure that people know you're not going to use their real names. And I think for the most part, I had people read the stories, or I sent them, and if they read them, they didn't, you know, they didn't say no. I can't guarantee they all read them before I included them. But I sat with each of my interviewees, and there were other interviewees whose stories are not in the book at this point, and just said, how are you going to feel, and what do you want me not to put in, and what's okay to put in. One of the people whose story is in the book just told me recently that she's not sure she wants to read it now, that it might be too hard. She gave me full permission.
Yes.
And I was very careful, but she is a little bit worried at this point that it might be hard to see it in the book. So, you know, maybe at some point it will be okay with her. But the sensitivity to other people's feelings and how they might experience it once it's in there, I would say just talk to people, know in your own self how you want to present the story.
That's very true. You know, I write a spirituality column, and I know that one of the approaches that I use is to encourage the person that their story is going to help others. I had to write about an incest victim, or survivor really, and a woman who was actually the product, a child of rape, when her mom was raped, and talking about what her life is like, you know, and how meaningful her life has become. But those are stories that often aren't told.
Right.
And I think that there's a level of trust.
Yes.
And there is also a feeling that your life means something and it can help someone else.
That's such an important point, and I thank you for saying that, because the people that I interviewed, I think to a woman, said, oh, absolutely, this will help people. Absolutely, I want you to write this book, and I want to be in the book, and I hope that it helps other women. That was to an individual.
And we have a couple of minutes here, and so I want to ask you, the spirituality, you know, developing your woman's intuition through these exercises and changing your perception, learning to trust your heart, very big aspect of your book.
Big.
And it's not something that you really find a lot in these kind of books having to do with advice, as it were. Can you talk about what drove you to make that such a major part of your book?
Wow, we could do a lot of time on that one. I'm going to give you as much of a concise answer as I can. Again, for me, clearing out all of the inner chaff, the rumble, jumble, in the book I call it the gobble, that takes me away from my inner truth. So that means, well, someone might say, well, my inner truth is that I'm furious at whoever. That's okay, that's part of the truth. So we clear through that and clear through the sad and the sour feelings to get to the clearer place of how I want to be, and how that wisdom of how I want to be is going to guide me. One of my favorite stories is the Hollywood story called Destination Wholeness, and about finding the truth about myself in the land of make-believe. It's one of my favorites in the book.
That is such a great metaphor. That definitely applies to the present for all of us.
Yes.
I love that. Now, Bette, how can we find your book and get in touch with you? Because I know that you are a very popular and sought-after speaker. So let us know how we can get in touch with you.
Okay. So my website is simply Bette, with an E, BetteFreedson.com, and one can contact me through the website. The book is available on the usual places, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and also from Pearl Song Press, which I will give a little plug to Pearl Song Press. One woman publisher, and she is the real thing, and she is wonderful. Her mission is healing the world one book at a time.
Well, that's
Very
certainly
special.
happening with your book. I want to really applaud you.
Thank you.
For a wonderful book. And it's a perfect gift for Mother's Day. Even past May, it will make a beautiful present, because I was so moved by this book and all the wisdom, truly, and encouragement and love that it radiated into the ordeal of parenting, which is really a joyous celebration in a lot of ways, but it can have its ordeal.
It can. It's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful, the joys of life for the children.
I want to thank you all for being here today. Bette Freedson, we'll see you the next time on It's All Right with Suzette.
Thank you.